Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is my first clip, so there are many shortcomings. I hope everyone will give me feedback so I can improve. Thank you.
Xander woke up. This was normal and something he generally did at least once a day. What was not normal was that he woke up in a blank space, completely devoid of anything. He wasn't even sure there was actually light in this space, yet he could somehow see his hands as he put them in front of his face.
You have been selected for translocation. Initiating Godsmarked training.
A thunderous voice boomed in the space, and at the same time as words appeared in front of Xander. Translocation? Godsmarked? What the hell was this shit? Some kind of weird dream? This didn't have the odd dream feel of any dream he'd ever remembered, but maybe they only felt that way after waking up.
Greetings, Godsmarked. I have been provided to you to assist in your training.
Xander whipped around at the sudden voice behind him and beheld a figure clad entirely in plate armor. Not a single piece of skin was visible, and with the voice being somewhat androgynous, he couldn't determine a gender.
"Who are you?"
asked Xander.
"And where am I, and what the actual fuck is going on?"
He eyed the plate-clad figure before him. It was head and shoulder taller than him, though he wasn't exactly considered tall himself, at 5 feet 9 inches. He tried to get a glimpse of something, anything, through the minimal facial holes in the helm, but was met with blackness, as if a fabric was plastered across the inside.
I
Reverberated the figure in plate.
am called Estoc, and I am a servant of one of the divines. You are currently in a space between things would be the easiest way to describe it, I suppose. As for your third question, you have been chosen for translocation. I cannot answer as to why, but for some reason, be it for their own amusement or perhaps to avert some future disaster, you have been picked by one of the gods to be transported to another realm.
Another realm? What the hell is that supposed to mean? I don't want to go anywhere. I have a wife and a house. Pets. I can't just go places without them. Is this even real? This has to be some kind of dream.
Unfortunately, this is not a dream, and I have no power over whether you are transported. I was simply created to provide travelers like yourself an insight into the realm into which they are to be placed. Though if it is any consolation, I am sorry. This cannot be easy for you. However, our time is limited, and I have a task: to teach you how to call upon and use your status.
With that, the figure waved their hand, and a portion of floating text appeared in front of Xander.
The folk of the realm you will be entering have access to a status window. It shows them critical information about themselves and their classes, which we shall go over next.
What?
Began Xander, only to be cut off by Estoc.
Please do not interrupt. Our time together grows short, and I have explained your situation as best I can. Now, as I was saying, the status shows one information about themselves: their level of injury, magical power, various physical attributes, as well as any skills they may have access to from a class or a title. This will become clearer as you utilize the window yourself. As for classes, they are gained from life experience, training, events in a person's life, or any other number of ways. Though it is uncommon for the average person to have more than 2 at a time, while an exceptional warrior or famed craftsperson may hold up to 5. As one progresses through a class, it may merge with another class and provide an immediate choice of another class. With this information provided, I now gift you the knowledge to access your own status window.
Estoc snapped their fingers, an odd metallic sound, and the knowledge was seared into Xander's mind.
Oh, Jesus, what was that?
Shouted Xander.
Knowledge
Was the only reply he received, as Estoc was swallowed by the nothingness of the space.
Godsmarked training completed. Calculating class choices.
Words again appeared in front of Xander, though this time they were contained within a window that he somehow knew he could call upon and close at will.
Calculation complete. Class options are as follows. Select 2. Farmer, soldier, trader, smith, magus, artificer, criminal.
What the hell?
Muttered Xander as he stared at the window. He wondered how these options were calculated and what they'd provide. Would any of them give him a way to get back home? Farmer. Must be because some of his family owned a farm. Soldier he could attribute to his contract with the National Guard. Oh God, the government is going to want to know I went, he thought. Trader could be from a retail job. Lightning magic. That could have been from his time doing electrical handy jobs. Artificer? He did like to tinker and build things. Criminal? He wasn't sure. He'd never really done anything particularly illegal. Maybe anyone could be one? With such little information provided, he had some hard choices in front of him, though some could obviously be tossed out in his opinion. Right. Farmer and criminal are out for sure. I don't exactly know anything about smithing, and I'd need someone to teach me, and I'm apparently going to be sent to somewhere where I'm not going to know anyone. Which probably rules out magus, too, since I'd probably need to learn about it. As much as shooting lightning sounds cool. In the end, Xander decided to go with the choices he felt like he at least had the most understanding of, soldier and artificer.
Class choices accepted. Generating class skills. Artificer. Level 1 passives store. Analyzed materials are stored for future usage by creation. Actives. Analyze. Determine the material and relevant properties of an object within 1 foot of caster. Creation. Creates a stored material. Mana cost depends on quantity, rarity, and other factors. Mana cost. Low to high. Manipulate. Manipulate the form of material that was produced by creation. Soldier level 1. Passives. Eternal march. Increased endurance. Scales with level. Weapons of war. Additional proficiency with melee and ranged weaponry. Scales with level. Actives. Shock and awe. Inflict significant additional damage upon a successful strike. Mana cost. Medium. 3-minute cooldown. Sprint. Increase movement speed. Mana cost. Low. Class skills generated. You have been granted 2 boons as compensation for being removed from your local realm. Boon 1 dispensed title, Gods Marked, imparts several passives on the title holder, Heaven's Bounty. You may receive additional objects from defeated foes, speak in tongues. Proficiency in languages of new realm provided. Quest. Patrons may provide you with tasks and rewards, reformation. Physical ailments and deformities have been healed. Xander paused reading as his vision became blurry, and he had to take his glasses off to continue. Cargo space. Integrated inventory function in status window. Titled. You have a greater chance of receiving titles than normal. Regenerative. You heal more quickly than usual, to the point where, given enough time, you may even regrow a limb boon 2 dispensed. Choose from personally owned items in former realm as equipment. Must fit in inventory or own person.
This was going to take a long time to calculate. A list of every item he owned began to fill the status window still floating in front of him. After an indeterminate amount of time, Xander was ready. He had found out that the cargo space ability had granted him 10 spaces which he could place things in, though there was a size limit of roughly a large hiking backpack to them. More importantly, they were not limited to a single item as long as they fit within another item, so he could load up bags and then store them. He was also very glad that he had decided to buy his own helmet and plate carrier, as anything that he had been issued during his National Guard contract that he was expected to return did not appear on the list of objects he owned. He had loaded up several bags with everything he could think of that would be useful, most of which ended up being camping and hiking supplies and medical supplies. In addition to a few guns and weapons that he owned, a 12-gauge shotgun, a .22 tube fed rifle, and a 9mm pistol with all the ammo he owned for them, along with a small combat-ready Gladius he'd bought on a whim online, plus his ACH and plate carrier. He had also chosen the only books he owned that might come in handy: the Boy Scout Handbook and an old Army manual on improvised explosives that he'd bought at a surplus store. He was grateful for the inventory spaces, as there was no way he'd be able to carry all of the things he'd gathered. Getting things into the inventory slots was as intuitive as simply touching them and willing them to get in the space.
Second boon completed. Translocation to Realm, Tilania, initiating.
Xander passed out. This time when he woke up, it was dark, actually dark, and not just some kind of void. He could feel the weight of his plate carrier and ACH, a bit of the scabbard from his Gladius poking him as it hung awkwardly from the carrier, and a similar feeling from the shotgun on his other side. He'd opted to also put on his army uniform, as they were sturdy, bug-repellent, and most importantly of all, had big cargo pockets on each leg. He dug in one of said cargo pockets and pulled out a flashlight as he stood up. Turning it on, the darkness was banished from what appeared to be a cave. Unfortunately, there was also a skeleton slowly lumbering towards him about 15 feet away. Xander froze, staring at it. That was all really happening. A goddamn skeleton was in front of him, and it was coming closer. At 10 feet, he unfroze, dropped the flashlight, and scrambled to get the shotgun in both hands. He almost felt on autopilot as pumped the slide, shouldered the rifle, and obliterated a fist-sized chunk of the skeleton's rib cage and spine. The skeleton dropped to the ground as Xander dropped the shotgun, leaving it to dangle from its strap, and clapped his hands over his ears, which were now ringing.
Shit, that was loud.
He yelled to himself, as he wished he'd thought to actually put on the ear protection that was sitting in one of his inventory slots. His second thought was that tinnitus was actually no longer an issue thanks to the regenerative trait that he'd received. That didn't make the feeling any more pleasant, though. Xander knelt down to pick up the flashlight he'd dropped, thankful that it hadn't broken or turned off when he'd done so. Standing back up, he felt a slight tickling, for better want of a word, in the part of his mind that knew now how to open up his status. So after looking around for any more skeletons, he opened it.
You have defeated an enemy bonus experience awarded for first defeat of an enemy of this type. Artificer, leveled to 2. Soldier, leveled to 2. Touch remains of enemy to determine if Heaven's bounty takes effect.
Upon this message, Xander cautiously sidled up to the scattered bones of the now undead and kicked one of them. He was amazed to see the bones begin to roll together and meld into a kite shield that looked to be made of rib bones. It was rather morbid, but a morbid shield was better than no shield. He picked it up and turned it around in his hands a couple times. It seemed to be sturdy, though he wasn't sure how sturdy exactly, considering how well the skeleton had held up to a 0-0 buckshot, which was to say, not very well. He managed to strap it to his arm in such a way that he could still hold and pump the slide of the shotgun, and slid another round back into the tube while he was at it. Back up to 6, gotta remember to keep it full. He opened his status again and reviewed it more fully.
Artificer level 2 skills. Measure. Determine exact measurements of an object that has been analyzed. Measure and store produce. Schematic. Store entire objects to be used with creation. Soldier, level 2 skills. Effective ordnance. You may imbue an elemental effect into one attack. Mana cost, medium cooldown, 3 minutes.
Xander pondered the changes in his newfound status. Schematic seemed like it could be extremely useful, and anything that let him kill things faster and better in a world where skeletons existed was good. As soon as he got out of this cave, he was going to sit down and analyze everything he had brought with him. Fortunately, the cave did not have many branches, and upon closer inspection seemed not to be natural in origin. Tool marks lined the walls and small portions were gouged out of them. Maybe it was a small mine. After about 20 minutes of walking and a couple wrong turns to dead ends, Xander finally began to see sunlight. If this was a mine, does that mean there are people nearby? How will they react to me? God, I hope they're not aggressive. A skeleton is one thing, but I don't want to have to defend myself from someone alive. Another few minutes and he was out. He surveyed the area around him and saw not much, mostly just trees. He had come out the side of a moderately sized hill and seemed to be in some kind of forest. He'd rather have been able to see a town or something that indicated any level of civilization, but at least it wasn't a desert, right? True to his word, Xander sat down and began pulling all the bags he had brought with him out of his inventory space.
Objects. Analyze. Mossberg. Maverick. 88, 12 gauge. Shotgun, 12 gauge. 00, buckshot shot shell. 12 gauge, slug shot shell. Improved hot weather army combat uniform. Aluminum cook pan fork. Damascus, steel gladius.
This went on for the better part of 2 hours as Xander began to play with his skills provided by the Artificer class. He already had over 100 materials, store, and quite a few items he could replicate with schematic. Unfortunately, he was not able to store or use creation to make food, so that was going to be an issue once he ran out of the food he'd brought with him. He knew the theory behind gutting an animal, but he'd never done it before. Guess he'd have to learn on the fly in a few days. At least the water bottle with the water filter built into it was able to be put in schematic, so drinking water wouldn't be an issue. Though he'd probably still boil it first. Looking upwards, it seemed to be roughly noon, and he adjusted his watch accordingly. Might as well get walking. He didn't see any smoke or anything else interesting to head towards, so he decided to simply head directly away from the mouth of the mine he had emerged from. Another few hours passed as Xander walked. Anytime he saw something interesting, he would analyze it.
Objects analyzed. Hogweed, ironbark tree, printap flower.
Eventually, he came across a road. Well, road wasn't quite the word, more like a small, well-trodden path. It wasn't quite late in the day yet, but he decided that it would be a good place to set up his camp. Xander was surprised at how little the trek and stress of the day had tired him and marveled at the effectiveness of Eternal March. He could easily have continued to walk for the rest of the day, but was hopeful that if he stayed near this path that someone might come along who could help him find somewhere safer to stay than in some woods that may or may not have skeletons. In the meantime, he figured he could play around with some of the skills that he had acquired. Anything to distract him from the fact that he was far from home and might never see his wife, friends, or family ever again. He settled on creation first. The skills from Soldier all seemed pretty straightforward in their application, but using creation and then manipulate seemed like it had much wider application and nuance to it. A small piece of steel stored from a knife was the first thing Xander opted to create.
Stainless steel created. Created materials will begin to degrade when more than 5 feet from creator.
Xander looked at the message that had appeared on his status window at the same time that a small cube of metal had grown in his palm. It was unfortunate that materials he created weren't permanent unless they stayed near him at all times, but it was still a massively useful skill. He'd never be defenseless as he could create a number of personal weapons and armor essentially at will. He also noticed a slight drain on what he assumed was his mana, which was confirmed by another glance at his status, showing the bar that represented it as no longer being full. He'd have to be sparing with what he made for now so that he didn't end up with no way to create something useful in the case he needed to. He decided to try out rat manipulation next, focusing on the skill and willing the cube to turn into a sphere, watching with interest as the piece of metal smoothed and flowed, almost as if it were liquid for a moment before settling into the shape of a sphere. Unsure of what else to try at the moment, he figured it would be a good idea to see what the rate of degradation on his created materials really was, and put the marble on the ground and walked a short distance away from it as he began pulling supplies from his inventory space and setting up a small tent and sleeping bag. Once he was done, he walked back over to where he'd left the small marble and discovered it completely rusted and pitted as if it had been sitting in the weather for years, if not decades, considering it was stainless steel. He expected it would completely disintegrate if left for even a day, which meant that anything he created and needed to keep would have to stay on or near his person, or perhaps within his inventory space. Testing that theory, Xander created another small piece of steel and willed it into his inventory space. He'd check on it later. For now, he wasn't sure what else to do but eat an MRE and maybe read up on some of the books he'd brought. After eating, Xander checked the created steel in his inventory and was pleased to find it still in good condition. He would at least be able to store materials he created in small amounts so that he could build up a stock of them. The marble he'd left on the ground had already disintegrated. Another hour later, and with the sun beginning to go down, Xander began to despair of meeting anyone on this path. Try to look on the bright side. At least there is a path to follow, right? I can just keep walking down it tomorrow. A few minutes after this bout of despair, Xander began to hear whistling, a jaunty tune that was slowly coming closer from the opposite direction of the setting sun. He tried his best to look as non-threatening as possible without actually taking off his armor or removing his weapons from his person, which amounted to settling into his single camp chair and trying to appear relaxed. Eventually, the mystery whistler came into view and was revealed to be what would be immediately recognized to anyone even passingly familiar with the fantasy genre as a dwarf. Squat, wide-set, long beard, the works. Dressed in leathers and carrying a bow, quiver, and axe, he looked perfectly at home in the woods.
"Hello there,"
was all that Xander could think to say to the dwarf, who had definitely noticed him and his what he realized now was probably very odd-looking camp setup.
"Hello yourself,"
came back from the dwarf, who was still carefully standing a good distance away.
"What brings you to the forest this day?"
"I'm very lost, so I guess trying to get out of the forest is what brings me here."
Xander tried to inject a little humor to disarm the tension.
"You wouldn't happen to know how I could get to, well, anywhere, would you?"
The dwarf looked at him for a long moment and seemed to be thinking.
"Doesn't know where they are, wearing strange clothes, and using strange objects. You wouldn't happen to be a godsmarked, would you?"
"Yeah, you got me. I have no idea where I am, or anything about wherever here is. I've been here less than a day, and I was really worried I wasn't going to be able to find a town or anyone to help me before I ran out of supplies. I don't really have the skills to be fully self-sufficient out here. Would you be able to help me get somewhere like a town or a village or something like that?"
Xander felt a little awkward at being noticed as out of place so quickly, but he definitely didn't look like he was wearing anything even remotely like this dwarf was. And his tent was obviously not a material that would be available in a world where bows and axes were a common sight.
"I can do that,
Answered the dwarf.
as long as you're willing to put up with a few things. First, I'd like to see your status sheet to prove that you're not lying to me. And second, I'm tracking a bear that's been taking livestock from the nearby town, so you'll either have to wait here till I'm done or come with me and watch my back. Though if you don't mind, I'd like to set up camp here with you as well since it's getting dark."
"Oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. How do I show you my status? And I guess I'll go with you tomorrow. I don't fancy being alone out here. I've already had one run-in with a skeleton around here."
"A skeleton?"
The dwarf asked, interested.
Where'd you find yourself one of them?
In what I think was an old mine, roughly that way.
Xander pointed in the direction he'd come from.
There was just one. I didn't see or hear anything else in it. It's where I woke up after being transported.
Ah, I see. They do tend to occasionally appear in caves, old mines, anywhere it's dark and people rarely go, really. Likely not the work of a necromancer, then. You must be fresh if you don't know how to show someone your status. You just sort of will it to happen, and it does. Like this.
At the dwarf's words, a status appeared in front of him and then turned around.
Threpus Woodhammer, Ranger, Level 14, Woodsman, Level 17.
Xander noticed that the sheet left off most of the details, but showed enough for a person to prove who they were. Seemed a convenient feature. Or maybe one could decide how much information to show. He'd try willing the same information to appear. His status appeared in front of him, and then turned around to face the Thripus.
Xander Jones, Artificer, Level 2, Soldier Level 2.
Xander felt completely outclassed by the dwarf, who was 12 levels higher than him in his lowest class. He wondered just how much stronger, faster, and tougher such a level difference made the dwarf compared to him.
Soldier and Artificer, huh? Bit of an odd combination, but neither are bad classes. Everyone's are a little bit different, though, even if they have the same name. So maybe they'll grow to have a good synergy. You're definitely fresh at level 2, and I can see the gods marked on your status, so I'll help you. I'm sure you're pretty confused right now, so ask away once I get my camp set up.
Xander watched the dwarf set up his bedroll and a small cloth tent just big enough to keep out any rain. While he waited, he decided he'd try out creating something from schematic. He'd fired one shotgun shell, so he might as well replace it. His mana was full by now, recovered from the small amount drained by creating the 2 tiny metal cubes.
12 grams 00, buckshot shot shell created.
Xander felt an immediate drain on his mana as the shell formed in his hand, and opened his status to see that creating a single shell had drained nearly 3/4 of his mana. So much for refilling his ammo on the fly, he thought. He'd need to be proactive about restocking and do it during his downtime when he was safe, not in combat. Hopefully the bar would be full again by morning. He didn't have a great feel of the rate at which it recharged yet.
All right, I'm set up. Ask away, all that's left for the night is for me to eat, and I'm happy to talk at the same time.
The dwarf sat down near his tent and began pulling some leather-wrapped packets from a bag, which revealed trail rations as they were unwrapped.
Hungry?
No thanks, I already ate. Fortunately, I came here with a few days' worth of food.
Fortunate for us both, then. I don't have to cut the amount I'm eating and share.
So, where is here? I don't even know the name of this world, or I think I remember it was called a realm. There was a lot going on, and I hope this doesn't come across as offensive, but I've never seen a dwarf. Are there lots of dwarves? Are there other races? Do humans exist here at least?
Let's see. Well, to answer your questions in order, here is the realm of Tilania, and you're currently in the Argus Forest in the Kingdom of Dardan. Not much going on around here in this part of Dardan, mostly farming and the occasional band of guild mercenaries contracted to kill some big thing or other. Of course, that happens everywhere else, too. Dwarves are about as common around these parts as humans are, and you'll see the occasional elf. Though anything more exotic than that, you'd likely only see in a large city or another kingdom entirely.
Xander found the concept of something more exotic than an elf to be amusing, but kept that to himself.
I see. Well, I'm glad to find out I'm not the only human around. I think that would be pretty hard to adapt to. I'm not really sure what else to even ask right now. I guess maybe classes? I leveled up after I killed that skeleton. Is that the only way to level up? By killing things?
Not always, it depends on a class. For example, a duelist could earn experience for that class by winning a duel, even without killing someone. Or someone with a class geared towards crafting would gain experience for creating something. Your artificer class might work like that. But for other classes like Soldier, your main way of gaining levels is going to be defeating things, likely through violence. I will gain some experience for successfully tracking this bear, but the majority will come with taking it down. And don't worry about your levels. Right now you're low compared to the average person, but Godsmarked have a tendency to catch up quickly. Plus you should always remember that with enough preparation, just about anyone can defeat something higher level than them.
How do you know about Godsmarked? Are there a lot of them?
It's not exactly a common occurrence, but there have been enough of them that the average person at least knows what a Godsmarked is. It doesn't hurt that they often become well-known guild mercenaries or craftsmen, though there are still plenty that end up living quietly from what I understand. They're a tiny portion of the population, though.
Good to know people like me aren't feared or reviled, I guess. So, how long do you think it will take to find this bear, and how much help are you actually going to need from me?
Luckily for you, I expect to be done with this affair tomorrow. We aren't far off from it now, as it's been staying relatively close to town now that it's learned it can take a farmer's animals. I doubt I'll need much of anything from you, but out in the forest you never know what could happen, and 2 is always better than 1. The weather's nice for a few months yet, so we won't need a fire. I'm going to tuck in and sleep. I've been walking for most of the day. Don't worry about setting a watch. The area isn't known for banditry, and my skills will wake me if any dangerous animals get too close.
Oh, that's good to know. Thanks for taking the time to help me. I really appreciate it.
It's the right thing to do, especially to a Godsmarked. They say you're put here for a reason, and I'd hate to slight the gods by hindering that so early. Now go to sleep. We're rising with the sun tomorrow, if not before.
Xander did his best to sleep, but it was a long time before he could do so. Since he wasn't as tired as he should have been from walking so far with a plate carrier and helmet, he found his mind a whirlwind of thoughts as he lay in his sleeping bag. What was he going to do when he got to a town? He had no idea how to make a living for himself in a place like this. Would he be able to find a way to get home? He really hoped so. He was already missing Helen, and it hadn't even been a full day. She'd probably be frantic that he wasn't at home and couldn't get in contact with him. He wondered if she'd already called the police. It felt odd to realize that he was technically a missing person now. Would he end up on one of those true crime podcasts about people who mysteriously disappear? Eventually, Xander fell asleep, his dreams full of strange figures in armor and the occasional skeleton. The morning came quickly, and he was awakened by the sounds of the dwarf. Thrippus, he recalled after a few agonizing seconds of dreading having to awkwardly ask his name again, waking up and breaking his section of the camp down. Xander put his camouflage top back on along with his boots. He'd been too ill at ease to feel comfortable stripping down any more than that, and unzipped his tent, the noise drawing Thrippus's attention.
Mornin'.
Came from Thrippus.
Glad to see I don't have to try and wake you up through your tent. Time to get going after a quick breakfast.
Sounds good,
replied Xander.
I'll get my stuff packed up and eat, then I'm ready for whatever.
Xander went to work rolling up his tent and sleeping bag and stuffing them in their respective sacks before popping them into his inventory and pulling the bag that held his food out from a different slot.
That's a handy trick? One of your class skills?
Thrippus sounded a little jealous at the prospect of being able to store things and pull them from thin air.
I don't think so. It was one of the things I received for being a Godsmarked. Little bit of a consolation prize for being ripped from my own reality, I suppose.
It sounded a lot more melancholy when he said it than he meant it to, but it was true.
Sorry. My understanding is that's something that many of the marked struggle with. Some never truly get over it. I can only imagine being pulled away from my life and placed somewhere I'd never been before. Doesn't sound pleasant.
I can't say it's been amazing so far, but it's at least looking up some since I met you.
Xander tried his best to sound grateful for the dwarf, and he really was. It was just hard to shake off the feeling of homesickness that was already overtaking him. He pulled out another MRE, unsure what else to say to continue the conversation, and started to eat it cold, as he didn't want Thrippus wait any longer on him than he already was.
All right, I'm ready.
he said, stowing his trash away. Never know when an empty plastic bag might come in handy, especially in a world where plastic bags might not even exist.
Right then. Let's get to walking.
Thrippus shouldered his bag and began walking confidently in a direction.
How do you know where it is?
My track skill is high enough at this point that once I've picked up an animal's trail, especially one as large as a bear, I can relocate it and follow it like it was the king's thoroughfare.
The ranger continued on, following a path completely invisible to Xander. The only sign Xander was able to identify at all was the occasional tree that had been used like a scratching post, bark stripped in portions and deep gouges marring the tree. Seeing that the scratches extended well above his head, Xander remembered just how big bears were. He should probably load for bear. Literally. The mechanical racking sounds of him removing 0-0 buck from his shotgun and replacing them with solid slugs drew a curious look from Thrippus.
What is that thing anyway? Some kind of artificer weapon? Seems like an awful lot of moving parts for a weapon to me.
Yeah, let's go with that. That's the easiest explanation, I think. It's called a shotgun, and it fires a chunk of metal really fast at what I pointed at, to put it simply. Also, it's loud as hell, just a forewarning in case I end up having to use it. Do dwarves get tinnitus?
What's tinnitus?
Ringing in your ears that stays there forever because you heard too many loud sounds. Technically, it's damage to your ears, I believe.
Can't say that I have. But if it's a form of physical damage, any half-decent priest ought to be able to put it right, though they'll charge you for it.
Okay, good to know that 1, priests can magically heal things, which of course they can. I don't know what I expected. And 2, it's pervasive enough that it's a paid service. Thanks for that. Wouldn't have even thought to ask. This is all... I don't even know how to describe it. I just don't know what I don't know. Everything is new.
I hear the marked can struggle to integrate into society at times. Cultures and religions clash, and sometimes things would seem normal to any of us are things that some of them seem to consider immoral or wrong. Quite a few of them fall afoul of the nobility for a variety of reasons, from simple impoliteness to full-on fomenting of rebellion.
Xander didn't know how to respond, so he didn't. They walked in silence for another few hours, Xander's mind wandering through thoughts of what the new world he found himself in and the societies in it would be like, and Thrippus focusing on the bear's trail. Xander was so engrossed in his thoughts that when Thrippus stopped, he nearly walked into him.
We're close now. Time to keep quieter, make sure we're upwind, and move slowly. Fortunately for us, your outfit might look odd, but it does a good job making you hard to see in the woods. And I've got my skills. Now just follow me and try to step where I step. I don't fancy having to track this bear even further because we ran it off.
Xander kept the comment that the entire purpose of his clothes was exactly that, and just nodded, holding the shotgun a little closer. Slowly the two began to move. Thrippus was clearly taking a roundabout path now. And Xander wondered how he even knew which direction upwind was, since he couldn't feel any wind. After about a half hour of painstakingly creeping through the woods, they came upon a clearing which contained the bear.
A griffin this close to town is bad news,
whispered the dwarf.
We're lucky it's distracted by that bear right now, so we can try and plan something. Can't let it settle into the area, or it'll be more than livestock that start disappearing.
So what do we do?
Throw everything we've got at it and then run like hell if it doesn't work. The woods are thick enough in part that we might be able to lose it and lay low. Just make sure you stick close to me if things go to shit. We'll do it like this. I'll fire the first shot, load it up with all the skills I can throw on it. Then you follow up yourself as I'm drawing another arrow. Hopefully that should be enough overkill it doesn't even know we're here before it's dead.
Xander pulled up his status sheet just to review what he could possibly do in this situation. Only 2 things really applied: shock and awe, and effective ordnance. One just increased the damage of an attack, while the other applied an elemental effect. Unsure of what to pick, or even what all the available elements were, Xander decided to just go with fire. He gave Thrippus a thumbs up, which the dwarf seemed to understand well enough, and then shouldered his rifle to take aim. From the corner of his vision, he watched Thrippus do the equivalent with his bow. Thrippus's bowstring twanged, and the griffin immediately turned in their direction, a split second before an arrow embedded itself in its shoulder, or rather it would have embedded itself in the griffin's shoulder. Except that, to Xander, it seemed more like it exploded in several different ways, taking a huge chunk of meat along with it as the arrow shattered. The griffin wasn't dead, though, at least not yet, so Xander took that as his cue to fire the round that he had chambered earlier when he was merely worried about bears. Again, he felt the almost robotic touch of what he realized now was weapons of war, adjusting his posture slightly, straightening his aim, and holding him steadier than he would have been able to achieve without it. The report of the shotgun firing so close to him caused Thrippus to flinch, and he even dropped the arrow he'd been knocking, though that might have just been because the arrow had simply ceased to exist upon all the skills piling upon it activating. Shock and awe and effective ordnance proved their worth, as the hole that was left in the now very dead griffin's body looked more like someone had fired a soda can at it than a 12-gauge slug, and was releasing copious amounts of smoke as well as the scent of burnt flesh and feathers. It was not pleasant.
By the hammers of all the gods, what in the hell is that thing?
Thrippus nearly shouted once he had gotten over the sudden noise and seen the griffin collapsing to the ground.
I told you it was loud,
Xander replied, shoving a finger in his ear in a vain attempt to relieve the ringing.
Well, whatever the fuck it is, it did a good job. Probably would have bled out after the first hit, but you never know with griffins. They're right tough bastards, and an injured one is probably even more dangerous to people than an uninjured one. They've got a bad habit of viewing people as an easy meal. Let's see if we can't take some of the more useful bits like the talons and some feathers before we go. It'll sell well, and provide some proof of the kill. We can split the parts since you did help.
Objects analyzed. Griffin talon, griffin. Feather, griffin beak. Griffin bone, hide, griffin.
Xander once more began following Thrippus after they had stripped some parts from the griffin. The ranger still seemed confident in his direction, and soon they came across another trail, which began to appear more well-kept the further they walked.
We ought to be able to reach town before the end of the day. Long as we keep this pace up, let me know if you need a break. My endurance is probably higher than yours from the extra levels.
Xander was glad to hear that he'd be finding some semblance of shelter by the day's end.
I think I'll be okay. I'm fine right now. One of my skills, what's it called? Right. Eternal March gives me increased endurance. Says it scales with level as well. That's good, right?
Yes. It's not uncommon for skills that passively increase an attribute or something like that to scale with level, unless they provide a large one-time bonus. I've a few of my own. Track, for example. Increases in power with every level in Ranger I gain.
I see. And what exactly is endurance in terms of a status window? Is it just how long you can do physical exercise, or does it make you more resistant to being hit by something too?
It's both, for the most part. Not so much resisting something, though. A sharp knife will cut someone with a high toughness as well as someone with low toughness. But it allows you to push further and last longer through an injury, and that can make a big difference. A lower-leveled person might lose a limb and die from shock or very quickly from blood loss if they don't stem it. A higher-leveled person or someone who gains a lot of toughness from class skills could lose an arm and keep on going. Of course, they'd eventually need to tourniquet it and/or get some healing, but it wouldn't put them immediately out of action.
Wow, pretty hand to have then. Are there other attributes than just endurance?
Of course, there's dexterity, willpower, intelligence, a whole host of them. Some classes get really specific. I've heard of bards that get finger dexterity, not just dexterity. A class can change a lot of aspects of someone, though it's not often shown outwardly, with the exception of strength generally showing more muscle than before.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. Someone who's more flexible or smarter isn't really going to look any different than someone who isn't.
Right, but don't conflate intelligence with intelligence. The attribute allows you to process and retain information better, but it doesn't necessarily make you smart. I've met some pretty dumb mages before.
Oh,
Xander pondered these recent revelations. He was glad to be getting toughness from his soldier class. But he did wish he could get some source of intelligence. Better recall was a dream for someone like him who tended to be forgetful sometimes. Maybe Artificer would grant him some at some point. It would be better than something like finger dexterity. The two walked in silence for another few hours, stopping for a short lunch around noon, or at least as close to noon as Xander could tell. He doubted he'd set his watch perfectly. Hopefully there would be a clock somewhere in town, and hopefully they used a 24-hour day. They'd broken out of the woods right around the time they'd decided to break for lunch, and the landscape was idyllic. Rolling hills that looked like the perfect place for pastures covered the horizon. Unfortunately, Xander couldn't see a town yet. Another hour in, though, and Xander was pleased to finally see some buildings. They were scattered and didn't much seem to look like a town, but it was still a sight for sore eyes.
is that the town?
Not quite. Climp is over the next hill. What you're seeing now are farmhouses and barns. And no, I don't know why it's called Climp, so don't bother asking.
I take it that question gets asked a lot.
Unfortunately, it's not a large town, but it's a decent enough size. It's on the main road to the capital, so it sees enough traffic to sustain business. And the food and animals grown here flow out through the same roads, which means you're in luck as a God's marked. There's a small mercenaries guild office in town, who I'm sure would love to take in a fledgling soldier. And if that's not for you, then you might be able to apprentice with the town's tinker. You're a bit old for an apprenticeship, but I'm sure an exception could be made due to your circumstances. For your help with the Griffin, you're welcome to stay in my home until you make other arrangements. It's a bit small, but sleeping on the floor inside is better than an alleyway at least. I'll also make sure you get a good price on those parts, should you choose to sell them.
I think I will. I'm not sure exactly what I'd do with them right now, and I don't have any kind of money that would be accepted here.
Fair enough. You'll probably be able to net yourself enough to stay at the nicer inn for a week, or one of the cheaper ones for 2 or 3. Won't leave you much for buying things, but meals will be included. By that point, I figure you'll have settled on something to start working towards.
What does working with the Mercenaries Guild look like? I've just been dropped into a brand new world, and I don't know anything about anywhere. So I'm not sure an apprenticeship is quite where I want to go.
Well, that can vary quite a lot depending on your skill set. Some people can hire themselves out as bodyguards. Others take contracts to kill rare or dangerous creatures. Some take to spying or scouting. It really depends on your class and your personal niche. For you, I'd say you'd probably either be working with a group taking kill contracts due to your soldier class, or possibly as a supporting member for exploration contracts with your artificer class. Having a combat class along with artificer would make you appealing for that line of work. It's an extra guarantee that you'd be able to look after yourself a bit better should you need to.
I like the idea of exploring a lot more than just solely killing things. Do I need to provide credentials or anything? I don't exactly have any paperwork.
Your status as a Godsmarked will be enough proof for your lack of paperwork right now. They can help you get registered as a citizen of the Kingdom of Darden, as well as the registration required to become a member of the guild. It's fairly straightforward, mostly just an examination of your status window. I'm a member myself, and it didn't take long at all to register. Just have to pop back in every now and then and let them update your record. They're actually how I got this contract for the bear. Farmers pooled funds to put it in with the Mercenaries Guild. Might be able to wrangle some extra hazard pay out of it since there was a griffin involved.
Oh, okay. I mean, that makes sense when I think about it. It's easy to prove something if it's on your status window. Wait, can status windows be faked?
Not by any conventional way that I know of. I've heard of an illusionist that was creating an illusion of a status sheet instead of his own. But someone with a skill saw through it. The fines were pretty harsh from what I heard. Nobody wants someone going around with a fake status. Wouldn't recommend trying it.
Not planning to. Mine's pretty sparse anyways, not much to hide. What kind of stuff is available around town? I assume there's a smith, of course. What about a chemist? Alchemist, I guess.
Oh yeah, there's an alchemy shop, a tanner and leather worker, all the basic stuff. Now, if you want anything particularly fancy, you'd have to contract a merchant to bring it out to you or go to a larger town itself. But we make do fairly well. There's enough traffic that comes through that you can generally find what you want off of a trader passing by to somewhere else.
As they crested the next rise, Xander was finally able to see Klimp. Buildings lined what looked to be a well-used road, and there were 2 watchtowers, one on either end of the town that he presumed helped the town watch over the road itself. It wasn't particularly impressive, but it was certainly not a disappointment either.
I'm just glad to have found a town in the first place. I could have wandered in a different direction in the woods and gotten lost.
Here's what I suggest when we get into town. First, we offload these griffin parts before the shopkeepers close up. Then we get you registered at the guild. After that, I can recommend a decent inn you can sleep in until you take your first contract, if that's the direction you decide to go.
The process of selling the Griffon parts was relatively simple. Thrippus already seemed to know what they should sell for, and after some back and forth settled for what Xander assumed was only slightly less. The agreed-upon half was then given to Xander, who squirreled it away in his inventory space for now. Filling his cargo pockets with coins didn't seem the smartest idea, and he didn't have a coin purse. Once the 2 were done selling the various griffin bits, they began to move to another part of town. They had to cross the road to do so, and Xander noted a few wagons, not all of which were pulled by horses or oxen. Mixed in with the horses, donkeys, and oxen that would have traditionally pulled a cart on Earth, there was a scaled hexapedal creature. Xander gawked at the first one before realizing that Thrippus hadn't stopped and trotted to keep up. This world has some weird-looking shit. Thrippus lead him to the Mercenaries Guild next, just as he'd promised. It was a simple but sturdy-looking brick building. Inside, there was a long counter with several stools, but only one attendant, and the walls were filled with boards upon which various sheets of paper, scrolls, and even some leather scraps were nailed up. The attendant waved at Thrippus as he entered. But only one attendant, and the walls were filled with boards upon which various sheets of paper, scrolls, and even some leather scraps were nailed up. The attendant waved at Thrippus as he entered.
Thrippus, got that bear sorted out?
Oh aye, more than sorted. Bear had been killed by a griffin, which I and my friend here managed to take down.
Thrippus tossed the beak of the griffin, which still had some dried blood on it, onto the counter.
Speaking of, I've got a new member for you to get signed up. Found him in the woods. He's a Godsmarked.
A Godsmarked, you say? We don't get many of those around here. Can't say I've ever had the pleasure of inducting one of the marked into the guild.
The attendant turned to Xander and held out her hand.
My name is Dorley, and I'm pleased to meet you.
Xander tentatively took her hand and shook it, hoping this was the correct course of action.
Xander, nice to meet you too.
I'll leave you here with Dorley once I collect my payment, of course. She can tell you how to get to the Talon's Mark. That's the inn I'd recommend, by the way. You can find me at the bar there for a while after you're done, I'd expect, and I'll gladly vouch to the owner for you.
At the mention of payment, Dorley collected a small purse from behind the counter and placed it in front of Thrippus.
Thank you kindly, Dorley. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need a drink after tromping through the woods. I'll see you at Talon's, Xander.
At that, Thrippus made an about face and exited the building.
So, you want to sign up with the Mercenaries Guild? Can't say I blame you. The pay is good, and most of the marked don't exactly have much to tie them to one place. It can be dangerous, though. Are you sure you're up for that?
Dorley gave Xander a critical look up and down.
I think so. Obviously, I'm still, pretty fresh to all this. But I need some way to make money, and I'd like to see and learn more about the world. Ideally, I'd like to mitigate danger as much as I can, but I understand that there's going to be some inherent risk involved.
Fair enough. Once we get you signed up, open contracts are available to any member. But do you have any ideas for what kind of contracts you'd prefer?
Thrypus mentioned exploration contracts, said my artificer class would pair well with soldier for those kind of missions. He also mentioned kill contracts, but I'm not as interested in those unless there's nothing else.
I see. Well, there's just about always a kill contract on something up. Exploration contracts don't come up quite as often, at least in these parts, but you're in luck today. There is a contract to assemble a group to investigate and potentially clear out what might be some ancient ruins that will be heading out in the next week. There's still available space, so once we get you inducted, I'll add you to the list. No minimum level, fortunately for you. They aren't expecting much excitement, but it's standard practice to have places like that cleared before more thorough research or excavation is done. No one wants all their fancy scholars getting gutted by some crypt horror because they didn't do their due diligence in ensuring the place was cleared first. Bad for business. You just take a seat here.
Dorley gestured to one of the stools that was on Xander's side of the counter.
And we'll get the process started. Just signing a membership contract and letting me copy your status down, and then you're set.
Can do.
Xander sat down at the counter.
Do you need my entire status? Can I show that? I've only ever shown a shortened version once to Thrypus, and he had to explain how to do it for me.
Yes, I'll need your entire status. Have to make sure you don't have any titles like murderer that would invalidate you from guild membership or anything like that. It's the same process as showing the shortened version like you did with Thrypus, but you just sort of allow more. It's hard to explain. We've all been using the status window since we were children, so it's just intuitive for the average person. Give it a try and we'll go from there.
Dory reached behind the counter once more and retrieved several sheets of paper as well as a quill and ink.
All right, here goes.
Xander opened his status up.
You have defeated an enemy bonus experience awarded for first defeat of an enemy of this type. For defeating an enemy 10 levels or more above you, you have been granted the title Slayer. Slayer, damage against targets that are a higher level than you is increased. Artificer leveled to 3. Soldier leveled to 3. Artificer level 3 skills. Improved manipulation. Manipulate the form of a material. Reduced cost for create materials. Soldier level 3 skills. Recon by fire. Designate one projectile which will detect hostile entities within 30 feet for 2 minutes. Cooldown 10 minutes. Mana cost low.
Oh, I leveled up after that griffin,
said Xander.
I guess that's not too surprising, considering how low a level I am. Let me get this turned around for you, now that I've read through all this.
Xander again willed his status sheet to turn around to face outward, but this time focused on all the details of it.
Looks good so far,
said Dorley.
I can see it's your full status. Very nice titles there for your level. I assume that you got Slayer from the Griffon?
Xander nodded.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get to copying this down. Let's see. Xander Jones, human.
Dorley began copying out the status sheet while occasionally glancing back up to confirm some information. In only a couple minutes, she had completed the copy. Xander Jones, human, gods marked, heaven's bounty. You may receive additional objects from defeated foes, speak in tongues, proficiency in languages of new realm provided, quest. Patrons may provide you with tasks and rewards, reformation. Physical ailments and deformities have been healed, cargo space. Integrated inventory function in status window, titled. You have a greater chance of receiving titles than normal, regenerative. You heal more quickly than usual, to the point where, given enough time, you may even regrow a limb. Slayer, damage against targets that are a higher level than you is increased. Artificer, level 3, store. Analyzed materials are stored for future usage by creation, analyze, determine the material and relevant properties of an object within 1 foot of caster, creation, creates a stored material. Mana cost depends on quantity, rarity, and other factors. Mana cost, low, high, improved manipulation. Manipulate the form of a material. Reduced cost for create materials. Measure. Determine exact measurements of an object that has been analyzed, schematic. Store entire objects to be used with creation. Soldier Level 3, Eternal March. Increased endurance, scales with level. Weapons of war. Additional proficiency with melee and ranged weaponry, scales with level. Shock and awe. Inflict significant additional damage upon a successful strike. Mana cost. Medium. Cooldown. 3 minutes. Sprint. Increase movement speed. Mana cost. Low effective ordnance. You may imbue an elemental effect into one attack. Mana cost. Medium. Cooldown. 3 minutes.
There we are,
Said Dorley.
Now we just have to get you signed on. Wait a moment while I grab a copy of the membership forms from the back room.
She retreated from the counter to a door set into the far wall before returning a short time later with another few pieces of paper in her hands.
Okay, so all you have to do is sign here.
Dorley indicates a blank space on the paper.
And you'll be an official member. Don't worry about dues or fees. That comes out of the payments for your successful contracts. All these papers really say is that if you do anything illegal, steal from or harass another guild member, etc., then the guild reserves the right to revoke your membership. Feel free to take your time reading it, though.
Xander took the small stack of papers, which was revealed to be 2 copies, which he assumed meant he would be able to keep one, and leafed through them. True to her world, the majority of the document was rules about conduct of guild members. Nothing stood out to him for any of the rules, and the rest seemed to outline how the guild took its cut of payments for contracts.
I think I'm fine with this. I'll sign now. One of these is for me to keep?
That's right. We've found it's good practice to give new members a copy of the rules. It saves us from hearing the lame excuses of, "But I didn't know I couldn't do that." We used to hear so often.
Dorley slid the quill and ink pot over toward Xander. He took the proffered items and signed awkwardly as he'd never used a quill before.
There, now you are an official member of the Mercenaries Guild. There are branches all across the continent in multiple kingdoms. Membership, which can be proved by this.
Dorley pulled a small metal pendant of 2 crossed spears. Can get you through a lot of tolls at city gates, too.
Welcome to the guild, and good luck on all your contracts. Is there anything else you need?
I don't think so. Thrippus said you could tell me how to get to Talons, right?
Oh yes, I'd forgotten about that. Take a left out once you get out of the door and just keep walking that direction. You'll see the sign soon enough. It's covered in the talons of just about every beast you could think of.
All right, thanks.